We are delighted to welcome you. So without further ado, we'll turn it over to you to talk to us about food price inflation and what to expect in the next State of Food Security Nutrition report. Please.
Thank you very much, Steve. And today we had a special event to talk about the second part of the SOFI, the State of Food Security and Nutrition in the World, on food prices, causes, consequences, and policy lessons. What we have seen between 2020 and 2024 in the world has experienced a dramatic increase in food prices driven by a combination of unprecedented global shocks. The episodes described in this publication brings up what we call a perfect storm, illustrate how fragile global agri-food systems remain in the face of compounded disruptions. The only time we have seen something similar was around in the 70s. So what are the major events that have combined their efforts to create this situation? COVID-19 pandemic, where governments launched a massive fiscal stimulus and relief programs to protect households and firms, equivalent to around 16% of GDP. This created a pressure on demand side, which resulted in inflation, which create a problem in terms of inflation in developed and developing countries. Then we have the war in Ukraine that exacerbated the situation of prices because of restrictions of mobility of key commodities, given that Ukraine was a key exporter of wheat, sunflower oil, and fertilizers, and also because of restrictions of movement of fertilizers from Russian Federation. The war reduced food exports, disrupted trade routes, and pushed up fuel and input costs, amplifying inflation across the globe. And finally, climate shocks, which frequency and intensity has been increasing in terms of droughts, floods, and heat waves in major producing regions, which has added these constraints. As a result, the food inflation soared a peak of 13.6% in January 2023. Low-income countries were hit the hardest, with some experiencing food price inflation of up to 30%. Although food price growth slowed from mid-2023 onwards, by 2024, prices had only returned to their pre-COVID level of 2019, meaning that households endure multiple years of affordability challenges. Now, what this means in terms of impact on food security and nutrition? This has significant consequences for households and food security. First, the household purchasing power is eroded. Real wages has fallen 0.9% globally in 2022, while food prices have climbed, leading to reduced purchasing power. Households responded by shifting to cheaper and less nutritious food, reducing meal frequency and diversity, and prioritizing food for certain members, often men, reducing intake for women and children. So it opened again the inequalities in gender. Second, food insecurity has deepened. But the report shows that a 10% increase in food prices was associated with a 3.5% increase in moderate or severe food insecurity, and a 1.8% increase in severe food insecurity. These impacts are especially acute in Africa and Western Asia, where food imports dependence and currency depreciation made food even less affordable. Third, nutrition outcomes worsened. Among children under 5, food inflation is strongly correlated with acute malnutrition. A 10% food price rise led to 2.7 to 4.3% increase in wasting, and 4.8 to 6.1% in severe wasting. These deteriorations could have long-lasting effects on child development and on public health systems. Now, the impact has been uneven, mostly affecting the poorest countries, mostly located in Africa. There were some improvements in Asia and Latin America due to stronger social protection and economic recovery. But in low-income countries, we see the numbers to continue to be increasing and therefore affecting the most poor populations. Additionally, countries with food import dependency and weakening currencies face compounding challenges as their currencies depreciated, partially due to the rising global interest rates, and they were forced to pay more for food import price in the US dollars, deepening food inflation. Finally, the report looks at some policy recommendations so that we can avoid this type of problems in the future, and there are 5 policy lessons. First, targeted fiscal support. Well-designed, targeted, time-bound social protection measures are the most effective response to food price spikes. We have seen this proven in the case of Latin America, where we have very strong social protection programs. This will protect vulnerable populations without creating long-term fiscal risk or market distortions. Second, we need to avoid trade disruptions. Unlike last past crises, fewer countries resorted to blanket trade restrictions in this episode. Countries that preserve market openness while supporting vulnerable consumers have better outcomes. Third, policy coordination is necessary. Monetary and fiscal policies must be aligned. Poor coordination risks destabilizing inflation or delaying recovery, as we have seen. Fourth, we need to improve market transparency. And here is where, again, the Agricultural Market Information System, the AMIS, reduce uncertainty, build trust, and help stabilize markets. And these systems should be strengthened, especially in low-income countries. And finally, institutional preparedness. Countries with robust governance structures and pre-existing response mechanisms acted faster and more effectively, and investments in policy infrastructure and institutional capacity is essential for future crisis preparedness. So again, this SOFI underscores inflation can undermine progress. It underlines our vulnerabilities, and it also brings the importance of strengthening resilience, inclusiveness, and transparency to be able to avoid and minimize the risk of these problems. Thank you. Back to you.
Thank you so much. Let us now go to questions, and I will start with Edie, followed by Pam.
Thank you very much, Maximo. On behalf of the United Nations Correspondents Association for doing this briefing, my name is Edith Lederer from the Associated Press. You mentioned the issue of fertilizer prices. What percentage of fertilizers from Russia and Ukraine are actually being exported, and what impact would an end to the war have on both inflation and food prices? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ed. Nice to see you again. In the moment of the beginning of the war in Ukraine, of course, there was an exacerbation because Russia Federation was the first exporter of nitrogen to the world. Plus, also there were the restrictions of gas, and that resulted in a substantial increase in fertilizers. Over time, this has been resolved. There was more mobility of fertilizers around the world, and there were also new sources that start to come out. So the situation right now in terms of price of fertilizers has stabilized. But in the case that we see again a restriction to mobility of fertilizers, especially of key exporting countries, because it's a very concentrated market, yes, again, this will affect input prices and this will affect the prices of commodities, of food commodities. One of the more clear examples of the impact was on rice. During the war in Ukraine, rice prices were low because there were enormous supplies. But after a period of time in the next season, because of the high prices of fertilizers, which rice is intensive in use, there was less production of rice, and therefore that has an impact on rice prices after several months of the war in Ukraine.
Let me go now to Pam and then Linda.
Thank you, Dr. Torero. It's Pamela Falk from U.S. News and World Report. Thanks for the background. There is an offshoot of nutrition groups called N4G, the Nutrition for Growth, that works with the UN. Are you in coordination with them? They appear to have raised, or they say they've raised about $29 billion from development banks and private sector specifically for nutrition programs. How do you interact with them? And then also, just on the report, usually we can get a little sneak peek embargoed or an outline or something before the 28th when it's released. You're talking about it, but we don't have any reference points. Would appreciate it. Thank you.
No, sure. Thank you so much. The Nutrition for Growth, there was a summit in France, and that's where there were these commitments that you were referring to. Of course, we are in full coordination. We are part of the UN Nutrition Group. FAO has a huge nutrition group related to it, and we are working with them. Although significant amount of those resources, of course, are realignments or reassignments. The important thing that the report tries to bring is what I was referring of the impacts of price inflation, which is different to commodity prices. So commodity prices increase until the war in Ukraine, and then they start to recover. But food prices continue to increase constantly over time. And that's because they have other elements in addition to just the raw commodities. There was the energy prices that were increasing also, the transportation costs as a result of that, the labor costs were increasing. Now, what this means, it means that it will affect the quality of what we eat, because if a significant share of my budget is on food and food prices increase, I will basically, as I mentioned before, deteriorate the quality of my diets, and that will have an impact, of course, in nutrition. And that's where these policies and this N4G is a good way to be able to accelerate and to focus interventions. What I mentioned before is that a 10% increase in food prices will lead between 2.7 and 4.3 increase in wasting and 4.8 to 6.1% in severe wasting. So it's a significant impact. In addition, of course, there is an impact on severe food insecurity of 1.8%. So yes, it's very important to keep coordination. We closely coordinate with them, and we are part of that process.
You just clarify one piece. Thank you, Steph. One piece on what you said. You said that amount that they referred to was some of its reassignments?
Yeah, there is a combination of new pledges and also reallocation of resources towards nutrition work. So both of them brings the bigger numbers that you were referring to.
I see. Reassigned from where?
Yes, that countries are committing and then they're saying, okay, let's reallocate these activities to nutrition.
Thank you.
Linda?
Excuse me. Thank you. Linda Fasulo, NPR at the UN. My question has to do with the Houthi attacks on international shipping in the Red Sea. And my question is, how significant have those attacks been on the price of food? And once they stop, hopefully they will stop permanently, would food prices automatically be reduced by the chain, going back to that shipping route?
Yes, no, thank you. Thank you for the question. So one of the things that are extremely relevant today is the logistics, no? How we move fruit from one location to the other, especially because in the cereal world, the market is highly concentrated. There are very few countries that are the key exporters of those cereals to the world. And similarly in high value commodities. So if there is restrictions in the major routes of mobility, like what happened in the Panama Canal, for example, when there was a drought and there was congestion in the Panama Canal, or what happened in the Black Sea, or what happens in the Red Sea, of course, that will increase logistical cost, it will increase time, and that will affect commodity prices. Also, if it is an issue of conflict, it will affect the insurance of mobility that you put on the vessels, and that will also increase the prices. During the war in Ukraine, we observed a significant increase in insurance costs, and the same is happening in the Red Sea. So yes, that will have an impact over commodity prices and over food prices that move, but remember again, there is a difference between the commodity, which is the wheat, the maize, the soybeans, and the food, which is what you eat and you buy in the supermarket or in the retail store. What we are observing is that there is a constant increase on the food prices. The commodity prices spiked because of the elements I mentioned before, COVID-19, the war in Ukraine, the logistical issues, but then they started to fall again. The food prices continue to increase. And that's because of other elements attached to the production of food, which is not just the commodity, no?
Very good. Do we have additional questions in the room or online? I don't see questions online, I believe. So I think we will wrap up. Thank you so much, Máximo, for joining us once again today. So we had with us Máximo Torero, the Chief Economist of the Food and Agriculture Organization. Thank you so much, and we will watch out for the report. Thank you.